Hello, and a hello from Cali in Colombia. I was about to say good morning, but actually, it's a bit later here now because clocks went back in the UK at the weekend. So actually, it's midday here in Cali in Colombia, where we are, of course, for the 16th Conference of the Parties to the UN Biodiversity Convention. And it's the 10th day of these updates from the Wildlife Trusts about what's been happening at this very, very important meeting for biodiversity, where the whole world, almost 200 countries, are coming together to try and focus on the actions that they take collectively and within their countries to put nature in recovery globally and, of course, delivering it locally as well. Now, you would have seen, we had a bit of a celebration last night here in Cali because you might have seen the media. We had an amazing announcement from the Wildlife Trusts yesterday, which we've obviously been working on for a long time. And we were bursting to tell, but finally we were able to announce yesterday that we are purchasing the Rothbury estate in Northumberland, which is the biggest single area of land to come up for sale in England for the last 60 years. And we have also launched a fundraising appeal for it. £30 million is our target to get the whole estate. We've already taken possession of a bit of it, but we want to get the whole estate. But it felt so important to be announcing it while we were here in Cali in Colombia, when there's so much attention around trying to deliver 30 by 30 target, getting 30% of our land and sea in recovery for nature by 2030. And there was a lot of excitement here, particularly from the British delegation that heard that announcement. And it just shows that all around the world, there's projects like this happening as we move from just trying to conserve the best of biodiversity we've got left to the point where we're actually trying to restore nature. Really, really exciting. And if you want to donate for our appeal for the Rothbury estate, colleagues will put a link in the chat during this broadcast. Anyway, first of all, let's kick off with an update from the negotiations. I'll hand over to my colleague Kathryn Brown, who was once international negotiator for DEFRA, albeit in the climate negotiations, but she's able to understand properly what's going on in the negotiations. So Kathryn, give us your update.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, but some things haven't changed. And obviously we've seen it's all kicking off in Cali now. We've got all the ministers are there. So we've got over 100 ministers, which is obviously causing a lot of activity, not that there wasn't already a huge amount going on. And we've seen the UK Secretary of State for Environment, Steve Reed, giving a speech yesterday in which he was trying to really articulate and put the point across that the UK is back on the international stage on nature and on climate as well. And we'll talk a bit in a minute about some of the domestic stuff that's been happening today and whether the extent to which we can see that in terms of action. But a few things that have happened in the last 24 hours. So the Colombian presidency announced a Peace with Nature coalition, and this is a strapline that Susana Mohammed, the COP president, has been really pushing throughout the negotiations. And this is not part of the formal negotiations. This is one of the sort of almost side agreements we see, but 22 countries have signed up to that, and that's very much about people and communities re-engaging and establishing a better relationship with nature rather than a kind of government-led initiative. So the UK is not part of that coalition at the moment, but other countries like Germany are, for example. And we saw quite a few contact groups going into the night, particularly on DSI, digital sequencing information, which is something we're really, really keen to see push forward at this COP. We know that the contact group there is, has a lot of work to do, and they have been going through the day and into the night as well. So that's something that we're keeping a close eye on. But there are a few things that look to be starting to wrap up. So hopefully in the next day or two, we can start to tell you some of the decisions that have been made. There's been progress on the climate and biodiversity negotiation, the decision text there, and also on invasive alien species. So we're hoping that that's nearly done and we can start to look at some final text. But Craig, sort of thinking about going back to the domestic agenda and the budget today and how that relates to what's happening out in Cali, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, really interesting, Kathryn, because I think there was a lot of speculation ahead of the budget and actually, particularly yesterday in the UK media, that it was going to be a really difficult budget for climate and biodiversity. But actually what we've heard today is that that's not the case. We're actually kind of pleasantly surprised as the Wildlife Trust in many respects. The DEFRA budget overall has been increased a little, which is amazing. It's actually the biggest budget DEFRA's ever had. The farming budget is flat, but there's a particularly going to be and that's kind of amazing. We thought that might have been cut back. But actually, what they're going to do within that, and I had a briefing call from a minister this morning about this, actually what they're going to do is really try and put have a greater proportion of the budget and move much faster into supporting nature-friendly farming, which, of course, as a Wildlife Trust, we strongly support. And actually, they're going to phase out the crazy kind of old-fashioned basic payments for just owning land, irrespective of getting taxpayer handouts, irrespective of how well or badly you farm the land for nature, seems to be very wrong, and those will seem to be reduced much faster. And really importantly, they've kept the budget for what's called Nature for Climate budget, which is supporting things like investment in nature-based solutions, peat bogs, trees and forests and so on, wetlands, and the role that they can play in helping us tackle, mitigate climate change, in other words, suck carbon out of the air, but also adapt to climate change. So actually, we're quite pleasantly surprised with the budget today. It's been a lot better than was feared, and I think clearly DEFRA ministers have done a good job around the cabinet table in making the case for that, and we're kind of encouraged on that. I also just want to give a shout out, thank you to Susan on Instagram, Steve on LinkedIn, who have commented that they're very pleased with the Waterbury announcement. Thank you very much. We have put the donation link in the chat. The only other thing I just wanted to pick up on is, Kathryn, you were talking about this thing in the negotiations called DSI, that's digital sequencing information. And this is something, a really important process in the convention, where, and actually it's a UK official that has been co-chairing this very complicated process over the last few years. And hopefully what it will lead to is a regime where big companies like pharmaceutical companies that are making huge profits out of genetic information, biodiversity, actually contribute to a fund that helps pay for the protection of biodiversity and support the indigenous communities that are doing this. This is a real matter of justice and equity. And we should feel very proud that the UK has been coaching this process, and we are definitely hoping for a really good outcome at the end of this COP with respect to digital sequencing information. And we really would like the UK government to come out strongly, ministers to come out strongly in the next day or so to say they really support trying to get the best possible outcome on DSI, digital sequencing information here at this COP, because that will make it transform how we can protect biodiversity in some of the most vulnerable spots around the world and the indigenous communities that are doing a job in doing that.
Yeah, and just to say, that's where we've seen the UK showing real leadership at the last COP as well as this COP. So, the UK has been all over this agenda item, and it is one of the top ones. It's actually the one that observers are not often allowed into because it's so sensitive. So it's really good to see that being pushed forward, and fingers crossed they get to the end.
Absolutely right. Anyway, one of the things we wanted to talk about today is put the spotlight on the habitats in Britain that are particularly special in a global context. We're here in Colombia, Rob and myself, and we love this country. It's absolutely amazing. We've had a small opportunity to go bird watching on Sunday morning with BirdLife International and Audubon. That was absolutely spectacular, the birds and the species we saw there. And Colombia is often cited as the second most biodiverse country in the world, with large areas of intact forest, incredible mountain biomes, paramo grasslands and peatlands and cloud forest. Of course, it has two coastlines. In tropical seas, there's the Pacific coastline and a Caribbean coastline as well. And clearly a big priority of the Colombian government is to try and protect the biodiversity they've got. In the UK, it's obviously very different. It's one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. We've got rid of a lot of our nature a long time ago, sadly. And yet we still have some extraordinary biodiversity. And Rob, it's kind of interesting. What do you think? What do you reckon what would you say are those habitats in the UK that particularly stand out internationally?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. We're up in the cloud forest of Colombia just on Sunday, and let's do a sort of misty mountain hop to our own oceanic islands. We also have rainforest, temperate rainforest. We were talking about that, I think, on last week, and we have these extraordinary green on green. With lichens and mosses and liverworts on every rock, on every surface. Beautiful, beautiful ecosystems. So absolutely amazing. Shout out for the Alliance for Scotland's Rainforests, run by Judy Stoneman. She's doing an amazing job bringing together a whole set of organisations that are looking after the rainforests up in Scotland, and we're doing similar things in England. Again, a shout out for the Aviva Rainforest project that we're running, because our 100-year aim is to bring back that amazing temperate rainforest across the western shores. The other kind of really oceanic habitat that's actually it's not unique to the UK, but we have a huge amount of this particular habitat, is blanket bog. And this is where the weather conditions are so extreme, i.e. we're getting rain over 140 days a year, 200 days a year in some places. So these are some of the wettest places on Earth, not necessarily the heaviest rainfalls, but just that sheer amount of rain all the way through the year, and it doesn't freeze. It means that when vegetation dies on the ground, it doesn't actually rot away, and you start to get peat forming, even on slopes, even on tops of mountains. And this is called blanket bog. And Britain and Ireland has some of the best blanket bogs in the world. And the Flow Country has just been declared as a World Heritage Site because of those fantastic habitats. In fact, the largest semi-natural habitat in the UK is our blanket bogs. It covers 20%.
Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing. 20% of Scotland, 10% of the UK as a whole. Let's just do a little introduction from the Yorkshire Peat Partnership of what these blanket bogs are about.
One of our most degraded sites we have in Yorkshire. It's about 166 hectares, and it's so degraded you can see it from space, all the bare peat. So if you can imagine, this landscape actually wasn't here about 6,000 years ago, and then the climate changed and it got a lot wetter, and when it got wetter it became a lot more waterlogged, like you see, and these waterlogged conditions are quite acidic. And so the peat is actually made out of plant matter. So it's not quite finished decomposing just because it was so waterlogged, decomposition can't occur. And so it's just made out of plants. So you see here, there's bits of plants in the peat, and because they haven't decomposed, they're obviously full of carbon, because that's of course what plants are made of. And so the peat is pretty much just carbon and water.
So you mentioned bare peat earlier. Why is it so bad?
Right, well, so when you expose all the peat to the atmosphere, because it's just made of carbon, it interacts with the oxygen in our air, and it basically decomposes and becomes carbon dioxide, which of course we all know is a greenhouse gas, and adds to the global climate change, global warming. But when we cover the peat up, so when it's not bare peat, when it gets covered by the plants, then that process stops and the carbon stops being lost from this landscape. So it's really important that we cover the bare peat up.
I've had a great day with Beth and learnt so much about why peatlands are important for us. So for carbon storage, for water. I think what I've taken most is the water storage, how important it is that for flooding, for the wildlife, the habitats. I didn't realise that without peatlands we would have no drinking water, so they're pretty important, and I encourage you all to get involved, whether it's planting, whether it's surveying, whether it's just teaching people about peatlands and what they do.
Yeah, there's no question they are extraordinary habitats, but they are really, a lot of them are highly degraded, aren't they, Rob? And although you see the brilliant project there of the Yorkshire Peat Partnership trying to restore our broken, our degraded peat bogs, and by the way, the Yorkshire Peat Partnership is one of the biggest employers in that part of Yorkshire. It just shows the issue about employment and skills that you can get in the conservation sector now. But the shocking thing is we're still actually damaging the bogs we've got left.
Yeah, I mean, this is a real disgrace by Britain, is we're actually burning our peat bogs, and we're burning them for grouse shooting. They were all being burned, most of our blanket bogs were being burned. We've managed to persuade the government to ban burning on special areas of conservation and special protection areas, but unbelievably, the non-European designated sites, the so-called Habitats Directive and Birds Directive sites, including sites of special scientific interest, are still being burnt, and it's absolutely disgraceful, and it's just got to stop. And if there's one thing that there's many things the government needs to do in order to meet this nature target, but that's a pretty simple thing. Let's just stop the burn, get it banned. It's a disgraceful activity. It's highly damaging to wildlife. It pollutes our atmosphere. It allows greenhouse gases to pour into our atmosphere as well. It pollutes the freshwater system as well. So, and we've got high siltation rivers, all because of
all that soil coming off into the rivers because it's been burnt.
I mean, it's just got to stop.
And then it contributes to flooding as well. It's absurd. So we've got to finish that. Talking about other habitats, of course, we mustn't forget our amazing estuaries. We are an island nation and we have incredible estuaries around the UK, part of the high Arctic ecosystem. A really important part of the East Atlantic flyway. That's the migrating birds that come down through the East Atlantic, whether you're talking geese, ducks, waders that breed in the high Arctic, places in Svalbard, Iceland, Kola Peninsula, north of Fenno-Scandinavia, but overwinter there on our shores in the UK because they're frost-free and full of food. And of course, really important there that we've got to cut nutrient pollution. This is again, agricultural runoff, fossil fuel-based fertilizers on our land, and sewage pollution going into our rivers. And, we've had over the last year, for example, house builders making a big fuss about the need for nutrient neutrality. Actually, in the global biodiversity framework, the requirement is for the UK to halve nutrient pollution in the next 5 years. So an industry lobby making a fuss about just being required to stop making it worse is pretty pathetic. We need real action to halve nutrient pollution in our rivers and therefore around our seas and the impact they have on our estuaries as well. Because
it's not just our estuaries that are getting polluted by nutrient pollution, it's actually the whole marine realm. And again, that's another one of Britain's extraordinary habitats. Here's a few stats for you. So we have 80% of the world population of Manx shearwater, 56% of the world population of gannet, 34% of the world population of shag, 60% of the world population of great skewers. Our seas around Britain, they're nutrient rich, they're quite cold, extraordinary diversity. They really have got some amazing life. And, once you get under those things, you've got an extraordinary diversity affected by nutrient pollution for sure. Many uses around our busy seas, oil and gas and wind, renewables and aggregate dredging and so on. And overfishing is most of our seas have been heavily overfished. So we really need that network of marine protected areas, don't we, Craig?
We absolutely do. And we need marine protected areas that really mean what they say. We're actually stop damaging activities rather than ones that are just paper parks. But we can't talk about really special habitats in the UK without talking about chalk streams. And chalk streams perhaps is something we take for granted because we're very used to them in the UK. But my goodness, do you realise that there's only 200 chalk streams in the world and 85% of them are found in the UK? In fact, most of those are in one county, Hertfordshire as well. And the beautiful, astonishing thing about chalk streams is they have a constant temperature, consistent flow. They're crystal clear. They're beautifully crystal clear. Obviously wonderful habitats for trout, for grayling, for bullhead, for mayflies. But again, our chalk streams are in danger, partly because of over-abstraction, not least by water companies, and again, irrigation for agriculture as well. Pollution going to our chalk streams as well. Again, this is a disgrace. They are absolutely some of the best wetland habitats anywhere in the world.
And we've been doing a lot of work, haven't we, protecting chalk streams?
Absolutely.
In fact, we've got a video from Ruth in the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust showing us some of the work that we're doing to restore our chalk stream habitats.
That we have in our area are not particularly healthy, and they're not particularly healthy for a number of reasons. One is because of straightening or the way we've modified the channel. One is because the water quality is not great, and one is because there's not enough water. And part of that is that we rely on those same aquifers that supply the chalk streams to supply us with water in our taps. So while Wildlife Trust and other partners can relatively easily do practical work in the river like we're doing here, to improve the shape of the channel, and we can add gravel, we can add features, we can't put more water in the river, and that is quite a high level political problem. And if we don't have intervention from government, we can't solve that. If there's no water in the river, nothing we do will actually help. So we're sort of tied to politics in that sense, and tied to decisions of the regulator and the water companies and our elected representatives, how our water is used, how our water is regulated, and what the water companies are allowed to do. And if we don't have change from that level, there's no way we can change on the ground. Well, one of the good things about this area is a lot of people really do care about chalk streams. If you look at the chalk streams around here, most of them have got friends groups. There's the River Mel, River Shep, and people who have these rivers going through their villages are really passionate about it. They really want to make a difference and make the rivers better. But again, they are a bit stuck with bigger problems that they can't address on their own. Chalk streams are special because the water in them is special. It's because it's very clean and clear, and it's also should be coming out of the chalk springs at quite a constant temperature, so about 10 degrees C, winter and summer. And there are some species which require that and can't survive anywhere else. Also, that cool water is really good for fish, and in the hot summers, it's a good refuge area for a variety of species.
So great to see Ruth there talking about the amazing chalk streams. And shout out to Laurie, who grew up in Hertfordshire, loves her chalk streams, and who doesn't love chalk streams? They really are gorgeous, gorgeous habitats, really beautiful. Sam, also in Hertfordshire, loves volunteering for the Hertfordshire Wildlife Trust. Thank you very much, Sam. That's amazing that you're doing that. And particularly on the chalk streams, she asks, how can we engage more people to do more for wildlife? Well, volunteering is clearly one of those ways of engagement, and we've got our Team Wilder program where we're encouraging people, local communities, villages, all sorts of people to get together and start to create groups for wildlife, really tackling the issues in your local area. So if you want to get involved in Team Wilder, do go on our website and have a look at that. Lucy says, thank you for looking after our wildlife and natural habitats. Well, Lucy, that's what we're here to do. And we're supported by huge numbers of people across the Wildlife Trust. So really the thanks are to our supporters, our members, and all the people that are involved in nature conservation through the Wildlife Trusts.
Yeah, absolutely. 940,000 supporters across the Wildlife Trust, almost 1 million. So thank you for your support. It makes it all possible. So really, look, just to wrap up today, you can see that all the time how the discussions here in Carly and Columba around the Global Biodiversity Framework, they all link back down to the nature you know and love on your doorstep in the UK. But to restore that, we do need a really stepping up of action from the governments across the UK, across the 4 nations of the UK. And for England, the previous government produced what they called an environmental improvement plan, but it was no good. We thought it was a bit rubbish, and along with other NGOs, and we actually brought a legal challenge last summer. And when the new government then came in, they ripped it up, which we were very pleased about because it was rubbish, and they're now developing a new environmental improvement plan, which is really welcome. But we want to be really clear, it's got to be a really decent plan. I often talk about how, imagine if the UK was hosting something like the Olympics in 2030, you would have very clear project plans, Gantt charts, all of those kind of things to make sure we built the facilities in time. What we now have to do, and what we've committed to under the Global Biodiversity Framework, is to rebuild our natural infrastructure by 2030. And we need to take it just as seriously, if not honestly, of course, even more seriously than opening a few venues in 2030. We need a really clear project plans, how we're going to restore our broken habitats, restore our nature, restore the abundance of nature in the UK, and ensure things like 30 by 30, getting 30% of our land and sea in recovery for nature, is something that is worked on right across government, not just in the Environment Department, but something that we do at the same time as building new houses, at the same time as putting in clean energy infrastructure and so on. We need highly protected marine areas or improve our approach to the existing marine protected areas around the UK to protect nature and restore nature in our seas and around our coasts as well. We really need really strong environmental land management budgets, and to pay and reward nature-friendly farmers for farming in a way that restores nature at the same time. And we welcome the fact that the budget has not been decreased today, but ultimately we do need to see increases in the money that goes to supporting nature-friendly farming long term as well. We need to do some really simple things that actually, sadly, have just got delayed and got caught up in bureaucracy in Britain, like allowing us to have wild roaming beavers again. Right across the Wildlife Trust, we have loads of beavers in enclosures at the moment. We're beaver ready. We just want to let them out. So please, can we move as fast as possible to say that we can have wild roaming beavers in England again? And wouldn't it be nice if the government announced that during COP16? And of course, as we've heard, we need to protect and restore our magical peatlands and welcome continuation of the Nature and Climate Fund announced in the budget today. But the more that we can put funding into nature-based solutions for solving the climate crisis, the better. So that's it, our update from Carly in Colombia today. Thanks so much for joining. We'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks and goodbye.
Cheers.